I walk a straight line, shackled and chained. Oh, gruesome Gertie is calling my name. There is no mercy in this penitentiary. Just ask the Hillstring Gang or Angola 3. I'm here for life, I'm here to die. Inside these walls, inside the wire. And when the wolf cries, I know it's over. Oh, bloody Angola. Oh, bloody Angola.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Bloody Angola, a podcast 142 years in the making, the complete story of America's bloodiest prison. I'm Jim Chapman, and today I am bringing you another suggested story from a listener, and this is the story of Louisiana State Penitentiary death row inmate Owen Perry, who in 1985 was convicted of the murder of 5 members of his own family. So let's get into it, and I'm going to start by giving you a little history on Michael Perry. He was born on December 3rd of 1954 in Lake Arthur, Louisiana, which Lake Arthur, y'all, is located in West Louisiana, and it's part of what's known as Jefferson Davis Parish. And it's not a very large town, even today. There are only about 3,000 people that reside there, and most of the people that live there or around that area, they work in the oil fields. And this is primarily due to the proximity to the Texas line. It's only about 35 miles or so away, and also the proximity to the Gulf of America, not too much further away than that. So not much is known about Michael Perry's very young childhood, except that he was troubled mentally. So much so that at the age of 16, his parents drove him to Galveston, Texas for a mental evaluation. Now, despite what appeared to be some glaring mental issues, Michael did graduate high school. And during this time in his life, he was already kind of known as a little bit off, if you will, by those who knew him or went to school with him. Perry would often talk to himself. He was just considered very strange. However, he was not without talent and actually known as a pretty talented musician. He even played in a band called the Great Pretenders. Now, around this time, his brother suddenly dies in a work-related accident. And like any family that has to deal with or come to terms with the loss of a brother, a sister, a son, a mother, a father, it devastates the family. And Perry's younger sister, she really takes it hard. She eventually gets committed to a mental institution, and she is diagnosed with schizophrenia. And Michael also has his difficulty coping. He would tell neighbors that his dead brother was on vacation in England. He just could not accept the fact that his brother was actually dead. And I'll deviate for a second from the story to tell you. Now, with schizophrenia, a lot of times doctors will say that it's a significant event in a life that will really trigger it, especially in young people. So it's not surprising that his sister, after she was committed, was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And it's also believed that that runs in families. If you have a family history of that, they see a lot of cases where someone's diagnosed and their grandfather or grandmother, close relatives, also either have been diagnosed or they've had events where people would assume that was likely the reason. So back to it, it was not long before his parents took note of this and these strange behaviors. And just after his graduation from high school, they have him committed to the Central State Mental Hospital in Pineville, Louisiana. Now, at this point, Michael Perry is 18 years old. He's there for a while, and then at some point, he actually escapes the mental hospital. He somehow manages to make his way back to Lake Arthur, Louisiana, and his parents' home. Now, when he shows back up at the home, I just can't tell you why his parents did not call the police and basically say, hey, our son escaped from a mental hospital, and we need you to come in and take him back to the mental hospital. No one really knows why, it appears, but the fact is they didn't. They didn't call the police. They didn't do anything. So a few years pass, and these mental issues with Perry persist. He can't hold a job. He gets very reclusive, kind of hangs in his room all the time, and he's really losing touch with reality by this point. And by the age of 24, he becomes absolutely obsessed with a film star who had just starred in a hit movie, which would become one of the biggest hits of all time. And the name of that movie was Grease. And the film star was a relative newcomer, and her name was Olivia Newton-John, which in his mental state, that ain't good. He continues to slip deeper into this schizophrenic state. He wasn't diagnosed with it, but it was obvious that he was showing signs of it. He starts writing letters to Olivia Newton-John, and he becomes convinced that she is sending him telepathic messages. He's so convinced of this, in fact, that he cuts down all of the trees in his parents' front yard because he believed the trees were causing interference with Olivia communicating with him by using telepathy. And so essentially, he was basically hearing voices, her voice, talking to him, and he was convinced it was her, and he was actually talking back to her, which this is a telltale sign of schizophrenia. It's actually known as auditory hallucination. He would also exhibit other signs. For example, his mother and Olivia had the same color eyes. And due to this, he would go in and out of this state of mind where he would actually think his mother was Olivia Newton-John. Then suddenly he would kind of snap out of this state of mind, and he would realize his mother was not Olivia Newton-John, that it was his mother, and he would actually get pissed, extremely pissed, and he would get violent, and he would physically beat up his own mother. This happened several times. Now, it would come out later that Michael had harbored an enormous amount of resentment for the fact that his parents had had him committed when he was 18 years old to that mental institution, and that would play an important role, in my opinion, of how this case turned out. So I'll get to that later on. But as I said, he started beating his mother during these episodes. So his parents were like, screw that. And they told him he could not come in the house anymore without permission. And they had a large property where a bunch of family lived, including Michael's cousins were on this property. Of course, his parents' home was on this property, and also on this property was a vacant trailer. So rather than just throw Michael to the wolves, his parents were nice enough to allow him to live in this trailer on their property. And Michael progresses even deeper into his schizophrenia. He starts exhibiting symptoms of the paranoia aspect of it. One example of this is Michael is convinced that he is being monitored by his family. So he would mail himself empty packages, and he would pack them in a way that he could tell if they had been opened or tampered with. And he would do this, y'all, over and over again. He then started thinking that Olivia Newton-John is intentionally changing the color of her eyes as a method to keep him from communicating with her telepathically. I know it sounds crazy, but we're not dealing with what I would consider a sane human being here. He starts seeing rotting corpses coming through his floorboards, and he becomes convinced that Olivia Newton-John is responsible for this. And it's around this time that he leaves Louisiana and he travels all the way to Malibu, California. He camps out in the woods near her home for several days, and he tries to gain access to her home several times. Now, Olivia Newton-John, as you can imagine, she lived in a gated community, and she had security at the front and back gates. And he would actually walk up to this major megastar at this point in time. This is like 4 years after Grease had come out, so she's at the top of her stardom. He would go to the front gates and try to get in to see Olivia Newton-John. And of course, the security's like, go kick rocks. You're not getting in here. We're not going to let you in here. And he would leave. He tried this multiple times. But in this dude's fragile state of mind, he took this shit hard. To him, this is like Olivia Newton-John is rejecting him. Basically like they were boyfriend and girlfriend and they broke up. And he just gets filled with this massive amount of rage. He is so pissed off, it is like the straw that broke the camel's back mentally for him. He goes back to Lake Arthur, Louisiana. He breaks into his cousin's home. 2 of his cousins live there, both males, adult males. He finds one cousin in one room sleeping, shoots him with a pistol right in the eye, killing him instantly, goes into another bedroom where the other cousin is sleeping and shoots him in the head, killing him. He then walks over to his parents' house, which he knew they were on vacation, and their home was right across the yard, basically, from where his cousins lived. He knew they were on vacation, but he also knew they were scheduled to return home that morning. When he shot and killed his cousins, it was very early in the morning. So he goes over there, he makes himself something to eat. He turns up the music very loud, and you can only assume that's to drown out what I'm about to tell you about. But he just chills out on the couch, waiting for his parents and his young nephew to get back from this vacation.
Jim, did you see what happened in Texas today?
Wait, before you tell me that, let me tell you what happened in New York.
It cannot be as crazy as the case I told you about yesterday in Louisiana.
You know what? We should do a podcast about it.
And with that, we did. Crime Wire Weekly covers the crime news headlines that have dominated the week.
We cover trending crimes from all over the country and even sprinkle in a few globally.
Crime Wire Weekly is available now wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Simply by searching Crime Wire Weekly or clicking the link in the description of this podcast. The parents and his 2-year-old nephew get home. His dad opens the front door, and as soon as he opens it, Michael shoots him with his dad's shotgun. Now, at this point, he's 28 years old. He shoots his father, then shoots his mother, who was coming in the door behind his father, and then he shoots his 2-year-old nephew. Now, because both of his parents were still alive after that first shotgun blast, he shoots them both a second time, killing them. He then was unsure if his 2-year-old nephew was dead, so he shoots his 2-year-old nephew a second time to make sure. Michael then drags his mother's dead body inside the house. She had fell halfway inside the door and halfway outside of the door of the home. He drags her completely inside and closes the front door. And that also will play a part in my opinion of this that I'm going to give you at the end of this story. So at this point, he reaches in his father's wallet, and his dad had like $3,000 cash in his wallet. Look, he's coming back from vacation. I doubt the guy walked around with $3,000 cash every day, but he's coming back from vacation, and that's probably the residual of what he had. This is in the early 80s. Banks weren't as prevalent as they are now. ATM machines, I don't even think ATMs existed back then. So when you went on vacation, you brought a bankroll with you, and his father had a bankroll on him. So he steals that money, and his mom had a small portable safe that he took. It was called a strong box. He took that as well. He was going to break in that. If there was any jewelry or anything, of course, he's going to steal that, try to pawn it or whatever. And he flees the scene in his dad's car. So police, they get called to the scene, and it's not clear who called them or how they heard about this. But at some point the next morning, they get called to the scene. And as you can imagine, it's horrific. Some officers were interviewed at that time, and that's exactly the adjective they used to describe it. Just horrific. You've got a 2-year-old who is just blown away. The mother and the father both shot in just execution fashion. It's just an ugly scene. And as I mentioned, this is a small town, and everyone knew Michael. They also knew he had been in and out of mental institutions for years. So the fact that he's not on the scene and nobody knew where he was, it did not take, a rocket scientist or an extremely astute detective to know he probably did this, and he was the number one suspect. Police wanted to talk to this guy. In the meantime, the first thing they did was they searched his trailer. Now remember, his entire family lived on this property, and it was in his trailer they discovered a blank check. And on the back of that blank check, they find what police referred to as a kill list. Now, this list included the names of all 5 of the relatives he had just killed, as well as several celebrities. And the word Sky was written next to the name of each person he had killed, which I can only ascertain was meant as a reference to them being dead. It's almost like in his crazy mind, he's thinking, I need to keep track of who I've already killed. It's almost like crossing someone off of a list, except for he used the term sky, which I guess means they went up in the sky. It was another word for killed. And also strangely written above the list were the words, quote, the 10 Commandments. The biggest issue for police at this point was they had no idea where Michael Perry may be. And what they did not know at the time that they discovered these bodies of these 5 family members is Michael Perry had already made his way all the way to Washington, D.C. They would learn later he had planned to kill Supreme Court Justice and the first female justice on the Supreme Court, Sandra Day O'Connor. Now, later, Perry would say he targeted O'Connor because, quote, no woman should ever be above a man. So while in D.C., he would check into a hotel. He would go to the store and he would buy 9 televisions. And y'all, this is the early 80s. This isn't televisions like they have now. These things, a lot of people referred to them as bubble back TVs. They were very heavy. Even a 19-inch TV at that time weighed 1,000 pounds, it seemed like. He bought 9 of these sumbitches and brought them back to his hotel room, and he would tune them all to static because he would say later, static is the only thing that made sense to him. So Michael Perry is on the lam, if you will, for about 2 weeks in Washington, D.C. before he makes a mistake that would get him caught. Now, at the time of his capture, police in Louisiana, they thought Perry was somewhere in Beverly Hills, California, because they had discovered this obsession with Olivia Newton-John. So it was somewhat of a surprise to them when D.C. police contacted them and they said, hey, Michael Owen Perry. And when we were doing a search on his name, and y'all, this is in the infancy of computers, so it took them a while, but when they searched his name, they figured out he was wanted in Louisiana for those 5 murders. Now, the way he got caught is he was attempting to shoplift a radio in the nation's capital, and that in and of itself is wild because he had $1,100 in his pocket at the time of the arrest, but he tries to shoplift a radio. So police search his room after his arrest. They find these 9 TVs, all tuned to static, and they also discovered that he had written on the screens of these TVs the names of all 5 murder victims, his family. And on the sides of those TVs, another hit list was found with Sandra Day O'Connor and Olivia Newton-John written on that list. This was on August 1st of 1983. So Perry gets extradited back to Louisiana. And during his interrogation with investigators, he confirms that he killed his parents due to being mad at them for having him committed. And when they asked why he killed his 2-year-old nephew, he stated that his nephew was evil and a demon, and that's why he killed him. 2-year-old. So during his trial, he would do some strange things as well. He would craft headbands out of napkins, and he would wear those headbands to court. He would also show up to court wearing no shoes or socks, and he would have very dirty clothing on. And when he did wear shoes, of course, they would admonish him for this and say, you have to wear shoes. He would often remove his shoes during court, inside of the courtroom. In the media, they would ask him about this, and he would say, it's the lifestyle of the mafia. Very strange. It also came out in the trial that Olivia Newton-John was so frightened by Michael Perry. She was very aware of this stalker before he was caught, well before he was caught. As I told you, he was writing her letters, and his letters were even very crazy. But it came out she was so frightened prior to his capture that she moved from Beverly Hills back to her home country of Australia. She was quoted as saying in a magazine that primarily that was due to a photo that he sent the film star of herself, but her eyes were scratched out in the photo. There was something with Michael Owen Perry and eyes that bothered him. So evidence is presented, and eventually Perry is found guilty of the murder of his 5 relatives in 1985. And the question now with regard to his sentencing was, do you sentence him to the death penalty? Specifically, the question was, is Michael Owen Perry sane enough to be sentenced to death? And the judge had to consider this, and he was in a pickle. And I got to be honest with you on this one. This is the first case that personally that I've come across that I have covered where this dude may have kind of a legitimate gripe as far as an insanity defense. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve everything he gets, but by the letter of the law, in my mind, if anyone qualifies, it would be this guy. But I could definitely give you some arguments as well that would speak to his sanity during the murders, in my opinion. For example, in the case of his mother, he shoots her, kills her, and her body was basically halfway in and halfway out of that front door. So he pulls her body completely into the house and shuts the door. Now, in my mind, there's an argument that can be made there that this was an attempt to hide the crime. He also told police he killed his parents because he was mad at them because they had him committed to a mental hospital and that he waited for them to come home from vacation to do it. Let me break this down. For a not guilty by reason of insanity plea, you need several things. First, you have to prove you were insane at the time that you committed these crimes and you didn't know what you were doing was wrong. Well, when you pull a body inside of a home of someone you just killed and you shut the door in an attempt to hide the crime, that proves that you knew it was wrong and you didn't want to get arrested for it. Otherwise, you would have just left the body where it fell. Second, you waited for your parents to get home and you picked the day and time in which to kill them. Right after they got off vacation, when his dad would have a ton of money, right? That proves premeditation. That's also not something an insane person does. There was no sudden argument that got out of control and you lost your shit and you just started killing everyone. You planned it in advance. So I'm not sure what was running through the judge's mind. I'm not sure what he considered, but it would be my guess that he probably considered several of those things I just brought up. And he eventually imposes the death penalty for Michael Owen Perry. Now, I'm going to reference Ford versus Wainwright, which was a decision that was used as a precedent in this case. And the judges in that case ruled that if an inmate does not understand or is not competent to understand that they are getting the death penalty and they're going to be sentenced to death and they're going to die via, the state killing them, essentially, you can't impose a death penalty on someone that doesn't understand the ramifications of their crime. However, in this case, Michael Perry in Bloody Angola, he was prescribed an antipsychotic drug known as Haldol. And they had several doctors, psychiatric doctors assigned to him, and they stated to the judge prior to this sentencing that while on this drug called Haldol, Haldol, his condition was controlled enough that he fully understood what being sentenced to death actually meant. So the judge imposed the death penalty. And obviously, this case, being as sensitive as it was because of all these extenuating circumstances, it goes through Appeal City, and it ends up in the Louisiana Supreme Court. And the question was, can the state force Perry to take Haldol, which is the drug that deemed him competent for execution? You see, Perry didn't want to take it. They were forcing him to take this drug. And that was the question before the Supreme Court in Louisiana. And they ruled 8-0 that he could not be forced to take the drug, which, according to the law, you would think that would negate the legal authority to execute him, because these doctors were saying when he's not on that medication, he has no grip of reality. But as of today, Michael Owen Perry does still sit on death row some 30 years after his conviction. Now, they say that one of the things he does inside of Bloody Angola is he drops soap in his toilet bowl every night. And eventually, I guess the CO's there, they asked him why he does this. And he said it's because his toilet is hungry and his toilet likes to eat soap. So apparently his toilet is like a pet to Michael Owen Perry. He talks to his toilet. He feeds his toilet. And look, we all know soap, if you drop it in a toilet, eventually it dissolves. But in Perry's mind, that's his toilet eating the soap. I mean, if that ain't some crazy shit right there, I don't know what to tell you. Not saying I agree, disagree, or whatever with the sentence that was imposed. I'm just saying by the letter of the law, I don't know if there's anyone any crazier than this story that I just covered right here. I'll say that. But if it was my family that he killed, you know, I'd say he gets everything he deserves with the death penalty. But there you have it. The full story of Michael Owen Perry. Thank you so much for listening. Check out the Patreon at patreon.com/Bloody Angola Podcast for commercial-free early releases and more. Check out Exposed, Scandalous Files of the Elite. I cover all the wildness that occurs in the world of the elite members of societies, whether they're sports figures, entertainers, you name it, I cover it. Exposed, Scandalous Files of the Elite in Crime Wire Weekly. It is myself and Kelly Jennings of Unspeakable, a true crime podcast by Kelly Jennings, and we cover the crime headlines that have trended throughout the week, and we do it in our own unique fashion. I promise you, you will be entertained. Check us out, Crime Wire Weekly, wherever you get your podcast. And until next time, for Bloody Angola, a podcast 142 years in the making, the complete story of America's bloodiest prison, I'm Jim Chapman. Peace.
I walk a straight line, shackled and chained. Oh, gruesome Gertie is calling my name. There is no mercy in this penitentiary. Just ask the Hill String Gang.